Let's get into a couple Big 12 night games that we have. First one is number 11, Iowa State at West Virginia, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. And Dawn, the storyline to know is, can Iowa State prove itself as a top Big 12 contender in what is a tough road environment in Morgantown? So entering the preseason AP poll, Iowa State had the 6th most votes among Big 12 teams. So in the AP poll, at least in preseason, they were the 6th best Big 12 team. Right now, 6 weeks into the season, they're the highest ranked team in the Big 12. They have a 5-0 record, which is the first time since 1980 that they've done that. They'll try to continue proving themselves this week on the road against West Virginia Mountaineers. Right now, 3-2 on the season. Maybe that doesn't sound great on the surface, but both those losses came to teams that are still undefeated in Penn State, who's number 4 in the country, and Pittsburgh, who's now ranked in the top 25. West Virginia, currently a top 30 team in PFF's power ranking, and they're coming off a 24-point victory over Oklahoma State this past weekend. So yes, West Virginia is 3-2, but those 2 losses came to teams that are still undefeated, one of them being a top 5 team in the country. So I'm excited to see this if Iowa State can continue proving that they are a legitimate Big 12 contender or not against West Virginia.
Tell you what, West Virginia fans must be so sick of the state of Pennsylvania. Huh?
Oh yeah,
I just thought about that just now. I'm like, oh, those are the 2 teams they've lost to. Yep. Oh boy, yeah. And honestly, we would look at this West Va team a lot different had they not blown a 2-score lead to Pitt. And obviously it's been an issue that I'll get into with their pass defense, but they're picking up steam, I think. I think they're figuring this thing out on offense. They were better on defense against what is a very much struggling Oklahoma State team last week. But that was a big question, is going into that game, okay, can you, against a struggling quarterback in Alan Bowman, can you go in there and cover better than you've been covering? And they did that in their run game. They found the groove in their run game again with Garrett Green and Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson. What's the thing you always tell me? You're not wrong. You're just early.
Yeah.
Maybe we're just a little early on West Virginia, but no, this is exactly what we pictured, what we've seen the last couple of weeks. And again, they absolutely should have beaten Pitt. No question. They were up 2 scores late in that game, and they just didn't make stops at the end of it. We would look at them a lot different, I think, if they were 4-1 with just the Penn State loss than if they lost had they won that Pitt game. But like you mentioned, Pitt's 5-0.
Yep.
That's a pretty good team in their own right. So it was a more even game at the time than I think that we thought it was. But neither of them were conference losses. West Va's in this thing. This is a massive, massive game when you think about it for West Va, because you go, oh, if you beat Oklahoma State, who was supposed to be a contender, and you beat Iowa State, who is currently supposed to be a contender, they're right back in it.
Oh, yeah.
All the teams we talk about in the Big 12, if West Va is starting to pick up momentum in their offense, you got another fun team to watch in this conference.
Definitely. So, Dawn, you have the Cyclones offense in this one. So what should we be looking out for when Rocco Becht has the football?
Okay, so let's start with Iowa State. This is very much a contrast in style, right?
Oh, yeah.
Iowa State they're going to throw the football. They got a little bit of run game with Abu Sama, and they can do a little bit, but their offensive line still kind of struggles to get push up front, and they're really more about 3 guys. It's Rocco Becht, and it's Jaden Higgins, and it's Jalen Knoll. And I'm going to focus in on these 2 receivers real quick. Jaden Higgins, 6'4", 215, big possession receiver, and Iowa State's got a history with these guys, right? You talk about Alan Lazard, you talk about
Xavier Hutchinson,
Hakeem Butler. It seems like all of the time Iowa State has some 6'4", 6'5" receiver who just has wicked body control and catches everything.
Who was the guy that was a bust in the NFL? Didn't he go to Iowa State? Oh, I'm blanking. Hakeem Butler.
Yeah, well, he's back now because he went down to the UFL, and he was like the best receiver in the UFL this year. Now he's back. I forget what team he's on, but he left to the UFL. And
he's back to the NFL.
He's back now.
Okay.
Yeah, he was like the best receiver in the UFL this past year, and I forget where he signed. Someone in the chat remind me.
I loved Hakeem Butler coming out of college.
He was awesome, but they always have some big-bodied 6'5" guy with good body control and hands who can do exact. Jaden Higgins is a chain mover. Okay, he's a problem. Well, when you talk about in routes and back shoulders and all the things that those usual Iowa State big receivers can do, he's the guy. He's like a carbon copy of the last 7 of them they've had, right? So really good player on the outside. Jalen Knoll plays mostly in the slot. This is a speedster. I'm going to tell you something, Max. If you asked me pick one reason Iowa State is 5-0, it's Jalen Knoll. Mm-hmm. Flip on the tape. Every one of the biggest plays of their season is him. He's a guy who can get vertical. He's a really good route runner. He had, I think the first play of Iowa State's season was a 50-yard bomb to him that he caught in double coverage. He won the Iowa game. He had a huge touchdown, and then he beat Sebastian Castro twice on their last drive to get them in range for what was a bomb of a field goal, like 58 or whatever it was. Jalen Knoll make big plays. He makes big plays every single week. This is quietly these are two of the best receivers in college football. So, I mean, let me tell you something. They're both in the top 5 in receiving grade in the country.
Wow.
Iowa State has 2 of the top 5 receivers in receiving grade in the country. They're one of just 3 teams, along with Ohio State and Washington, with 2 400-yard receivers right now. This is a dynamic duo, and you have an accurate quarterback in Rocco Beck that gets him the ball on time. Higgins and Knoll are a huge problem for a Westphal team that has not been able to cover at all. This secondary, and we thought with some transfer guys that were coming in, Aubrey Burks at safety, we thought this secondary would be really good. And they've just kind of caved this. They were better last week, better against Oklahoma State. 49.6 coverage grade. That's 127th in the country. Yards per coverage snap, 7.06. That's 112th. 15-plus yard completion percentage allowed, almost 19%. The eighth worst in the country. They play a ton of zone coverage. They don't ask their guys to like one-on-one press man, do all that. They just kind of lose the football. And it's the reason they lost the Pitt game. We've seen it pretty much every week except for their last game. And this is the thing. It's like, okay, did they finally figure it out, or is that just Oklahoma State? This is the biggest question, because these two guys, Higgins and Knoll for Iowa State, they'll tee off on you. No question. This is one of the best pairs of receivers in the country the Cyclones have. And again, Rocco Beck is very good, plays on time, reasonably good athlete, right? And again, I'm going to just stress it again. Jalen Knoll just makes big plays. You talk about clutch. He's the number one reason to me that Iowa State's ranked number 11 in the country right now. West Virginia has to find, if they found it last week in coverage, cool, but they need to find it consistently, because it's nothing short. They've just struggled to cover all year. They just need to find the football. I mean, that's really what it looks like to me in zone coverage for them. Just find the football and get to it, and there's too many times where they're not doing that.
Yeah, honestly, and even more so than that, I mean, they got to get a pass rush going, right? I mean, because Iowa State offensive line hasn't been great this year. So if you get that pass rush going for West Virginia, which also hasn't been good either, right? The pass ruch hasn't been great for West Virginia, I believe.
It's been better than the coverage. Right?
It's hard not to be worse than the coverage.
TJ Jackson and those guys up front, been better than the coverage. When I watch them, and yes, there's a good amount of clean pockets, but this secondary, they need to get to the football. They need to find the football. They need to match up they need to plaster the receivers better. Again, they play a lot of zone coverage. It's not like they're being asked to do, press man and like sometimes I've talked about with some other teams running too much man. They just need to be better, and they just need to be better to their assignment.
Yes, West Virginia is 88th in pass rush grade this year. Iowa State is 107th in pass blocking grade this year. So that's another way for West Virginia to maybe slow down the passing attack, because I do agree with you that I think Iowa State has a distinct advantage. If it turns into that as those receivers, because that's secondary, Iowa State has an advantage. But West Virginia has a big advantage on the other side of the ball. This West Virginia offensive line, Dawn, has been dominant this year. And I will start with the Iowa State. Their secondary has been outstanding. 10th best coverage grade in the nation. But their front seven leaves a lot to be desired. Right now, the Cyclones are 95th in run defense grade, 117th in tackling grade, and 98th in pass rushing grade. Iowa State allows 5 yards per carry, 1.9 yards before contact. That's a 96th best in college football. They're also only 94th in college football with a 28.6% pressure rate this year. So the Iowa State front seven, the defensive line specifically, has not been very good at all. The secondary has been really good. Front seven has not been good. Garrett Green and the receivers have been average this year. So that's an advantage for Iowa State. The secondary against those receivers, that's an advantage. But the Mountaineers can always fall back on this dangerous ground game with one of the nation's best offensive lines in college football. West Virginia right now, Power 4's highest graded offensive line, 86.9 grade this year, 85.2 pass blocking grade, 85.4 run blocking grade. Dawn, they're the only offensive line in the Power 4 with 85 plus grades in pass blocking and run blocking. And also, they're the only offensive line in the Power 4 with even 80 grades in pass blocking and run blocking. Wyatt Milam, in particular, the left tackle, I think this guy is playing his way up into first-round conversation. He has been the best offensive lineman in college football so far, and he's played some elite teams already, like Penn State already too. I think Wyatt Milum is balling this year. He's playing an amazing season so far. I think he's becoming a first-round caliber prospect, and that offensive line is dangerous. And also, you have a three-headed monster in that backfield. It's not just one running back you got to worry about. C.J. Donaldson, Jaheim White, Garrett Green at quarterback as well, one of the best rushing quarterbacks in college football. West Virginia runs for 5.9 yards per carry. And not only that, not only is the offensive line blocking for them really well, they've broken a tackle on 31% of their carries. That's the third best in the Power 4 this year. So you've got three dangerous guys running the football in Donaldson, White, and Green. You have an unbelievable offensive line as well. And you've got a defensive line in Iowa State that's really, really struggled this year.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think this Westphal offense is, I believe it's a top 10 graded offense in the country. They're dangerous. They're back to being dangerous. I know we saw them against Penn State struggle. To me, the struggles against Penn State were more about their wide receivers and just not being able to separate. And then eventually Penn State, just like last year, took the game over. But this Westphal team can score, and they do it their way. I think we talk about certain teams like K-State and Georgia Tech and some other. This is one of those teams that has this type of backfield and this type of run schemes, right? Where it's like triple option, read option, one coming on the jet. Again, Donaldson and White are two great backs. I mean, it is a problem trying to defend this team. And Iowa State, one thing to mention is just a ton of injuries at linebacker.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just so depleted this year at linebacker, really struggling. And this is another one of these offenses. I talk about it with Kansas State, a lot, or Georgia Tech a lot, where your linebackers have to be on it against these teams, reading offensive linemen. And even if you're reading them, this offensive line for Westphal, they're just getting after it. I believe they had two guys make PFF's team of the week last week against Oklahoma State. Dominant unit. I think Westphal is really starting to they found the rhythm on offense. If they can find it on defense too, they're a real threat.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, obviously there's two distinct advantages for both these teams. Iowa State's got a distinct advantage with their passing game, and West Virginia's got a distinct advantage with their run game. Who ultimately ends up winning the game because of that advantage?
This is tough. This is because of that, right? The contrast in style is at any point, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll can kill you through the air. And at any point, Garrett Green or Jaheim White or C.J. Donaldson can take off on you on the ground. And this game being at West Virginia, I think, makes it even more difficult because that's a fun environment. And again, West Virginia's alive and well. They lost 2 games, but they lost 2 conference games. Are they going to get an at-large bid? Probably not. But the odds of them getting that anyway before the season were pretty unlikely unless they had beaten Penn State, right? So they're looking at, okay, just do what we need to do in the Big 12. They're an explosive offense, especially on the ground. I don't know what it is. I think the ball control part of it too, because Iowa State, we've talked about them struggling in the trenches. It's just something in my gut that feels like a Westphal win here. I think it's a high-scoring game. I think you have 2 defenses that have real flaws. There is a fun contrast here. I believe Iowa State, I think they have the highest coverage grade on deep balls. It's either deep balls or 10-plus yard targets. I was looking at something.
That's a good stat. No, because Garrett Green loves to throw the deep
Garrett
ball.
Green loves to throw the deep ball.
Chicks love the deep ball, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just – exactly. And I think that's an interesting contrast. But West Virginia's ability to control the pace of this game and maybe even shorten it to an extent and keep the ball out of Rocco Beck's hands – I don't know what it is. There's just something about this game I look at, and I feel like Westphal is going to win. I got them 34-31.
I feel the same way. I got West Virginia winning this game as well, 28-24. I think this offensive line is going to maul Iowa State. I think the Mountaineers are going to run wild with Garrett Green and C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White. And if you do that and they got to stack the box, Garrett Green can go over the top on you as well. I think Iowa State has an advantage in the secondary, and they have an advantage with their passing game against West Virginia's secondary. So I don't feel great about it. I have West Virginia winning 20-24, but also the fact that it's in Morgantown at night, it always gets weird in Morgantown at night. I think West Virginia is going to pull off the upset and ends Iowa State's undefeated season and takes down a top 15 team in the country. And West Virginia once again reminds everyone why we at least were high on them entering the year.